Rising, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well.
Grand Rising. Peace, peace.
Grand Rising to the chat.
Peace, everybody. Grand Rising. Peace.
Grand Rising. Grand Rising.
Let us know y'all can hear us by putting the ones in the chat so we can make sure our levels are right. Make sure everybody can be heard. Just turn everybody's levels up so we can be coming through a little better. All right. Grand Rising, David Corey. Grand Rising, LJ Free. Grand Rising,
2212. My bad.
No, you good. Grand Rising, Copper Color Queen. Grand Rising, Cherokee Outlet Indigenous Aborigine. That's a mouthful. He says I sound far away. Okay, see if I can fix that. Is that better?
Same.
Mic check. 1 2 1 2. Grand Rising to the chat.
He says a little better. Let me see.
22.
What about now?
1 2 1 2.
How about now?
Sounds good on my end. I'm listening on the. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, cool. All right. Again, hope everyone's having a grand rising. He says it sounds like I'm in a space shuttle.
Space doesn't exist. I don't want to get this channel deleted for conspiracy talk.
Yeah, don't do that. That would not be good. That would definitely not be good. So today we're going to be continuing and talking about some of the individuals that signed the treaty. But before we get started, how was everybody's day yesterday? After we got off of YouTube.
I took a too long nap, so I'm rested.
Took a too long nap. Okay.
It was a little too long.
Don't leave that where it's at.
Yeah, I'm with you, Brittany, on that one. I don't know about that too long nap, but okay. Too long nap. Anybody ever taken a too long nap? Never mind, don't ask that. Oh.
Well, your nap ain't never last too long. It was just too long. It's almost like a night's sleep. I shouldn't have done it, pretty much.
Oh, so it threw everything off.
Yep.
Grand Rising smoking Big 06. All right. Well, I had a good day yesterday. I was able to help Miss Afua Jones with her nonprofit. So she did most of the work. All I had to do was make sure that we get her $9.90 sent off. But she's ready to rock and roll. So I'm excited to be able to help her. So, but I'm glad to see everybody's doing well. Glad to see everybody in the chat. Like I said, we're going to be covering some of the chiefs and Cherokee members that actually signed the treaty. Let me go ahead and put the first individual's name in the chat. That would be William Hicks. He was actually one of the chiefs of the Cherokee. So give me a second. I'll put his name in there. And then we'll have Miss Brittany do us the honors, get us kicked out. So give me a second.
All right, how's everybody doing? Peace to the chat. Peace to the chat. Just let me know when you're ready for me, TMH.
All right. Give me a few more seconds. I just put the link into the chat. Grand Rising Antonio. And then I need to pull it up myself so I can see, because that's kind of important. All right. All right. So Miss Brittany, when you ready, we ready.
All right. Peace to the chat again. It says William Hicks, Cherokee Chief. And then it says William Abraham Hicks, 1769 to 1837, age 68. Was a Cherokee leader and chosen interim principal, chief of the Cherokee Nation. In October 1827, he succeeded his older brother, Charles Hicks, who died in office January that year, 2 weeks after coming to the position. The Cherokee Council named John Ross as the second chief and Elijah Hicks as president of the National Committee. William Hicks served until October 1828, when the council elected John Ross as principal chief. Hicks was of mixed race and became a wealthy farmer in the Oothcaloga Valley of present-day Georgia. He supported European America education for his and other Cherokee children, as well as the opening of a mission and school in the valley. He was baptized as a Christian about 1819, as was his brother and other allies among the Cherokee.
All right, Brittany, hold up for a second. And do the Brown brought up a great point. Grand Rising Indigenous Intelligence. He said they love bringing in that the fact that they was a mixed race, and it seems like, and it's just me, but it seems like the mixed race Indians end up being the wealthy ones. So, at least that's the way it seems.
Right.
So, just wanted to point that out. Sorry for interrupting. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, that was it for that part.
So you could it'd be early life and education.
Okay. Charles and William's father was Nathan Hicks, 1740 to 1829, a Scottish trader, son of Robert Hicks and Mary Courtney. Their mother was Nancy Conrad, 1740 to 1770, a half-blood daughter of Swiss immigrant John Conrad, 1720 to 1754, and Jeannie Uncostoda, 1724, daughter Uncostoda, Rainmaker, 1702 to 1783, and Anawaki of the Red Paint Clan, 1704. As the Cherokee had matrilineal system, the children belonged to their mother's clan, where they gained their social status, and boys were guided by males in their mother's family. Nathan Hicks and Nancy Conrad had Sarah Kusdoga, excuse me for the mispronunciation, 1758, Elizabeth, 1759, Mary, 1760, Nathan Jr., 1764, Elizabeth, 1766, Charles, 1767, and William, 1769. William Hicks became active in the tribe, supporting his brother in many actions. He developed a farm in the valley of Oothcaloga Creek, as did Major Ridge and numerous other creeks, turning into a recognized garden spot. It was near present-day Calhoun in Gordon County, Georgia. During these years, Hicks became allied with Major Ridge, who also had a farm in Oothcaloga. They shared some ambitions for their children and the Cherokee people. They both sent sons to study with the Moravian missionaries and Gambols. In addition, William Hicks became baptized as a Christian, as did his brother Charles and his wife, and Ridge's wife Susanna. Ridge later hired a private tutor for his son John Ridge and sent him to a private white school. About 1822, Ridge and Hicks urged Father Gamble to open a mission at Oothcaloga and to establish a missionary school, as they had more children to be educated. Charles R. Hicks, William's older brother, advanced to become a second principal chief of the Cherokee, serving for years in that position. 2 weeks after the death of Pathkiller and succeeding him as principal chief, Charles also died on 20 January 1827. The tribe was without a leader and under pressure for land cessions by Georgia and North Carolina. At the time Major Ridge was Speaker of the Council, he assumed leadership of the lower house. John Ross continued as president for the National Committee, or under-house following, increasing civilization of the leadership for nearly a decade. In 1827, the Cherokee changed their government to a constitutional republic, which incorporated many aspects of the Cherokee tradition. Perhaps because the adoption of the new constitution had provoked an outcry for representatives of bordering states, Georgia appealed to President John Quincy Adams. The council chose to put in place an interim government. At its meetings in October 1827 at Oothcaloga, it named Hicks as principal chief, John Ross as second chief, and Elijah Hicks as president of the National Committee. William Hicks succeeded his older brother. William Hicks served until October 1828, during a time of tension in December 1827. The Georgia government claimed Cherokee territory was under a jurisdiction, while the council was meeting. General Koki asked it to meet him and 2 other federal treaty commissioners at Hawaii, but the council declined. It said those meetings were only about ceding land to the United States, and the Cherokee had no more land to give. John Ross became principal chief in October 1828 of the European and Cherokee ancestry. He had been educated in American schools, was bilingual, and was among the mixed race elite leaders of the tribe, who were more acclimated to the European American ways. Most of the tribe did not speak English. George Laurie was elected second principal chief, Lewis Ross as president, and the National Committee, Warren Snake as speaker of the council. John Martin as Chief Justice of Supreme Court. At the time, William Hicks and Major Ridge were chosen as counselors of the chiefs. Like Ross, the leadership of the National Committee was predominantly men of mixed race who were wealthy and bilingual in English. Members of the National Council, the time chiefs, tended to be full-blooded and spoke only Cherokee. Among the issues they were considering was trying to regulate missionary expansion, which both Hicks and Ross discussed. The tribe had asked the missionaries to get their permission before bringing in more personnel, but were ignored by the Tennessee Methodist Conference. Disappointed that Ross was chosen as principal chief over him, Hicks was considered to have become eccentric. Ross took him with a delegation to the Washington to discuss land issues, but afterward, Hicks' actions were considered increasingly erratic. Hicks died at age 68 at I can't say that right. Creek, Georgia, before removal.
Hold on for a second, Brittany. You read a lot.
Yeah.
Due to the vision was saying, it seems like John Ross was killing people to move up in ranks. And yeah, it seemed like a whole bunch of people was dying. And it's interesting that, you know, the full-blooded Cherokee who spoke mostly Cherokee language,
right,
they felt that it was more advantageous for them to have Ross and Hicks represent them because they felt that they had more persuasion. They knew how to deal with the Americans a lot better. And that's where it seems to me that it got a little dicey. Because even though, you know, Hicks and Ross were for their tribe, one, they were already wealthy. So they had something to lose.
Right.
And, you know, they were able to use a law to try to further advance the rights of their people. But in the end, it seems like the Eastern Band pretty much got, for lack of better terms, screwed. And L.J. Free says, interesting how religious affiliation is being spoken about so predominantly within a narrative all of a sudden. Well, Free, also too, we as we talked about in the Revolutionary War when it came to the Haudenosaunee, a lot of these tribes where you have these mixed chiefs and prominent Indians, they're seeking out these religious entities so them and their children can get schooled, so they can become more, I guess, astute and influent in the ways of the U.S. government. So it seems like they're seeking it out. But I could definitely see how the kidnapping of the narrative and a change in power starts to take place. So, Brittany, there's only a little bit left to read, and let's talk about the marriage and the family, and then it'll be good. You'll be good, and some of these names. So, you know, work through it. You've been doing great so far, but that's some long words.
Alrighty then.
Take your time and work through it. You'll be fine. I'm gonna go ahead and mute.
All right. William Hicks married one, Lydia Oothcaloga, half-breed, born about 1792 in Spring Place, Georgia, daughter of James Stans, big half-breed, 1750 to 1834, and Hannah Oothcaloga Gritterden, 1756 to 1838, daughter of Gritterden and Jeannie Daughtry. She was born about 1776 in C.A.B, Georgia. and died 1849. Their son, Chief George Augustus Hicks, was a conductor of the Trail of Tears that went through Fort Smith, Arkansas. Lydia also married Leonard Shaw, son Fred Shaw, Daniel McCoy, daughter Catherine McCoy, James Chisholm, children unknown, James Foster, children John Tyler, Watt and Tom Foster, George Chisholm, children Nelson, Lydia, and Polly Chisholm. He married to Sarah Bethia Foreman, called Sally, 1804, in Tennessee, daughter John Foreman, and Susie T. Todd Esky, Rattling Gord, 1760-1830, daughter of John Gord and Titar Skiki, 1741-1823. She was born about 1788 in Cherokee Territory in present day Tennessee and died September 1st, 1839 in Fairfield, Cherokee Nation, Indian Territory. Children Ellie Judge J. William Jr. Ruth, Carrington Margaret, Albijah, Ella, and Sally. Sally died on the Trail of Tears September 1st, 1839.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being brave and reading all those names.
Whew. No problem.
A lot of syllables, right? And it looked like when it comes to the marriage and the family, they were marrying prominent women in the tribe. Because you see the names of the women.
They was just crossing, like remarrying.
I'm like, because you see their American name and then you see their Indian name, and then it mentions that they were half breed.
And that's why they kept remarrying, marrying a different man.
A whole bunch of kidnapping going on. And so this was William Hicks. He was one of the Cherokee chiefs. And as we see, like with the How Did I See It, they brought in a lot of mixed Indians. Seems like they were very prominent. The Cherokee were prominent dealing with a lot of the Scottish and Dutch that the women were marrying and having children by. And their sons end up being the chiefs of very prominent men that sat on a council. And then they would bring on the religious aspect and send their children to school. And they said all the children that went to these Indian schools were mixed or half-breeds. So we start to see how the tribes are starting to become lighter and lighter because of all the mixing down. Then even the prominent women in matrilineal society are what he called mulatto, and then they're marrying Dutch and Europeans or other Europeans. So it don't take that much mixing to eventually wipe out a race of us. That's for sure. Doodle Vision says Cherokee and Baptist are synonymous. He says I could tell y'all tons of stories linking Cherokee and Baptist. But Doodle, I sent you the link, so please come on in, brother. Don't let me stop you. If you need me to post it,
I ain't gonna stop you either.
I know, right? He says it takes 2 generations of mixing to basically wipe us out. So if you figure that this is around 18 to 1830s, so we're already pretty much been wiped out from a standpoint of in the leadership roles, because as you see, these principal chiefs have already had their fathers or uncles already in power in the late 1700s, early 1800s. So it had already started taking place. And it's interesting to notice that they talk about the children of the mulattoes going to these Indian schools. I wonder why none of the full blood sent their children to these schools. Something to think about. He says half the house is still asleep. We got in late last night. Y'all hear snoring if I come on now. Fair enough, Chase. But like I was saying, we see that there are a lot of the what they call mixed or half-breed Indians, whether it was a Haudenosaunee or whether it was a Cherokee or other tribes. All the children that went to school, these Indian schools from these churches, were mixed. Why is it? And this is just my speculation. Me asking a question. Why does it seem like we don't hear of any of the full-blooded children going to these schools and learning these traditions?
Man, we don't like a European education now.
Oh yeah, that's right. Never mind.
It's hard to get some of us to stay in that program and try to pay attention to it.
I mean, just for, I guess, like a term, posterity's sake, just to be like, hey, we want to go, we want to learn. But then again, it could have had something to do with the fact that we were, excuse me, we were ostracizing some of these mixed children, and they had to go to these other schools because they may have gotten treated differently.
Couldn't go to our school.
So, just a thought. So the next
plausible.
So one of the other Indians that we're going to talk about that signed these treaties is Edward Gunters. And I didn't really find anything on him in Wikipedia, but there was some information on him under the Trail of Tears and removal claims and his and the land claims.
I hope he's not related to the Gunthers of today, is he?
Bruh, don't get me started lying. I'm going.
Yeah, that's the major
Likely, I mean, all these name changes.
No, I was asking because Gunther's the major. Edward Gunther's the major. Was a major car distributor.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of these people, they wealth tie into today, to who their family is today.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Like Betsy Ross and all them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they descendants of John Ross.
That makes sense. Go ahead and put this link in the chat. Again, we put these links in the chat so not only that you can follow us or follow the information, but if there's something that we miss or something that needs to be discussed, let us know. Or if you are part of the tribe, a part of the Cherokee, or one of the bands, and there's some information that you can either corroborate or there's some stuff that you would like to vehemently debunk, then please do so, because we want to make sure we get this right and we understand that this information is one side, so that doesn't make it absolutely right. So we understand that. Grand Rising Golden Moon, Grand Rising Tego. And he says, he said that's like light-skinned black people versus dark-skinned black people. Less melanin you have, the better your chances of having a place in the white man's world. It seemed that way, Tego. That's for sure. That's definitely.
And you can see that playing out in today's time, though. Like a lot of these traits ain't go nowhere.
Cool beans. All right. So we just finished William Hicks. Excuse me. And now we're gonna go into Gunther's. Edward Gunters. And this is from the Sequoia National Research Center. And the Sequoias came over into the Cherokees in the 1800s, around the 1830s. So Cherokee was taking some of everybody home. That's why their tribe got so big.
Almost a free fall, no application needed.
I know, right?
Here.
You get a band and you get a band. I'm sorry, go ahead. So no sellout when you get ready. We're reading Edward Gunther's reservation, S-182. This is his land. His land reservation clan. So you get a better understanding of who he is and some of the things that he accomplished. So it may talk about the treaty, it may not, but this is just basically about him, the man. So whenever you're ready, I'll meet the mic. My mic.
All right. A lot of this is shorthand, so don't think I'm just talking smack. All right. So Edward Gunther's reservation, S-182. So this is his reservation's land claim case. 0650 Land Office, Huntsville, A, 2 June 1832. Sir, with this you will be pleased to receive sundry documents filed in this office relative to John Gunther's and Edward Gunther's reservations in Jackson County, and now forwarded by request of the party filing. Very respectfully, Mob B.J. Pope. So 0651 Edward Gunther's land. Hugh Henry in February or March 1829 became acquainted with the place claimed by Edward Gunther. Thomas D. Ackerman then lived there. Does not know where Gunther then lived, but in 1820 Gunther lived on the south side of Tennessee. Never knew of his residing on his reservation. John Cox became acquainted with Edward Gunther in 1817 when he lived at his landing on the north side of the river. In 1818, Gunther resided on the south side of the river and has never lived on the north side since that time. Edward Cox had known Edward Gunther since February 1817 when he lived on the tract now claimed by him. Removed to the south side of the river in winter of 1818-1819. Gunther removed his houses lower down the river. Gilbreth Barton first knew Gunther in December 1818 when he lived on his reserve north of the river. Witness rented some houses on the south side of the river from Gunther until January 1819, when he removed in consequence of Gunther's wanting them. In February or March 1819, Gunther lived south of the river and has continued to reside there. Elisha Clampett. In 1818, Gunther lived on this land north of the river and in the latter part of 1819, and since that time has resided on the south side. In 1821, Gunther rented his land north of the river and ever since except 1 year. Robert Walker. First knew Gunther in 1818 or 1819, thinks 1819, when he lived south of the river. Kept the ferry for Gunther in part of the 1819 and 1820. Gunther left the north for the south side of the river in 1819. Alexander Gilbreth has known Gunther since 1808 or 1809. Does not know where he lived when the Treaty of 1819 was made, but in that year he lived south of the river. Benjamin Roeder became acquainted with Edward Gunther in the summer of 1819 when he lived south of the river. Has heard Howell Rose and Samuel Tyler say they rented land north of the river from Gunther and has seen the rent cow taken across the river. David Ricketts, or Ricketts. In the early part of 1820, Gunther lived south of the river and has continued to reside there.
Hold on for a second. Don't sell out. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like these are individuals that are vouching that he was on this land, or he lived on that land for a specific amount of period, so he can claim it, right? So maybe it seems like he was squatting. And also, too, Doodle Vision
I was
says,
about to say that.
yes, and Doodle Vision says that he just popped up out of nowhere. He has no lineage. but just look at this document here. It's a claim case, and in this claim case, people are vouching that he was on this land for a specific amount of time. I mean, this is the 1800s, and people are vouching for each other. So, I mean, is that tribal or is that not tribal? I'm just saying. Is that something we still do to this day, or something we no longer do to this day? I don't know. Maybe it's me. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. You stopped at John M. Cole.
John M. Cole. John M. Cole knew Gunter 15 years ago when he lived north of the river. Same year moved to the south side of the river and has resided there since that time. Thomas Aikman was Gunter's ferryman. Gunter for the last 9 years has not resided on the reserve. 0652. George F. Reed became acquainted with Gunter in 1818 when he resided on the south side of the river opposite the place now claimed and has lived on that side ever since. Gunter's houses were moved down the river near to his ferry landing in 1819. Apparently this man owns a ferry. 0653. Edward Gunter claimed to land as his ferry on the Tennessee River. Mr. McKee testifies that in 1819 he moved his northern houses a mile lower down the river to the ferry landing. His land was cleared and the ferry kept previous to 1819. Since 1819 has lived south of the river.
Hold on for a second.
Uh-huh.
He said he moved his house?
That's what it's saying. He said it twice. He moved his houses down the river a couple times now. And let me read that what Mr. McKee says, because it sounds like his ferry is without. Mr. McKee testifies that in 1819 he moved his northern houses a fourth of a mile lower down the river to the ferry landing. His land was cleared and the ferry kept previous to 1819. Since 1819 has lived south of the river.
Wow. And Doodle Vision says that Gunter came in and squatted like James Woods on Family Guy.
I am Peter Griffin.
So basically, these individuals are testifying, and I'm willing to bet by these names, these are also squatters that are basically testifying for one another that they all were on this land. Well, how much you want to bet? LJ Freeze.
Probably don't have no history before. Who his mother and father was and where he came from. That's probably why they're not telling you all that.
So it's safe to say they was probably immigrants. And Freeze says it's interesting how he popped in and out and nowhere doing the claims case. Convenient, ain't it?
Immigrants with an I.
Yeah, immigrants, not immigrants. Jago says a lot of those white people passed down that land today and got the advantage of today's society with the inheritance of that wealth that's clearly stolen, plus free slave labor money. Jago, can't argue with you on that.
Nope.
So yeah, it seems like he's not there doing the claim, as Free mentioned, but there are a lot of people that are testifying on his behalf. So this is interesting. Let's see. What do you remember where you stopped?
He was genetically. Dude tells me he was genetically engineered to squat.
It must be Friday. It's got to be Friday. All these type of shenanigans happen on Friday, right?
The Golden Moon said he moved up and down the river so he couldn't make up his mind.
I know, right? Just going around, just claiming his land. That's my land. Remember when you was little? Well, I know when we was little, we used to sit on the porch and be like, "That's my car. That's my car." So they did it with
walking around just picking up stuff.
That's my land. Interesting. So where did you stop at?
No, hold on, I'm checking. think Isaiah Walker.
Okay, yeah, you could pick up from there. But this is interesting. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right, so Isaiah Walker first saw Gunter in 1814 when he was wounded by the Creek Indians. In February 1819, Gunter lived north of the river and had a fine plantation down from his house to the ferry. He moved his houses to the ferry, and they were made the center of survey of the reservation. Got better land by removing.
Hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't it say he got wounded by the Creek Indians?
Isaiah Walker first saw Gunter in 1814 when he was wounded by the Creek Indians.
Could it be their land he was squatting on?
And caught
Was it
one.
Isaiah Walker that was wounded by the Creek Indians, or he saw Gunter when he was wounded by the Creek Indians?
Well, it looks like Isaiah. Well, either way, because
it doesn't say.
Right, either way, because I'm guessing that these individuals are vouching for one another, because you got Isaiah Walker and Rob Walker. I'm assuming that they're brothers or father and son. So either way, the Creek Indians wounded Gunter or either Walker.
Somebody got hit.
Yeah.
You know that.
Somebody got wounded by the Creek Indians
Somebody got hit.
in 1814.
And you just don't call people Creek Indians unless they by the creek. Now let me guess, the creek is probably where that ferry was located. I mean, I could be wrong.
Keep moving down.
He want to keep.
Down the river.
That's probably why he had to keep unpacking his house and repacking it.
Because he kept having to move, right? They was chasing him off the land.
He had to dip out every time. How you move a whole house?
They made that man build a Lego house.
He had a scout or something. Somebody was letting him know somebody was coming. He had to move.
Look, Copper Color Queen says it's amazing how laws were put in place regarding squatting and other things after the things they had done. Of course, that's the way it was done. And Antonio says he was talking to Tego. And Digit San Marico, Grand Rising. Grand Rising. Yeah, we're talking about one of the individuals that signed the treaty. And we're reading his testimony for this land claim, which is basically him being a squatter. This is Edward Gunter's. And so we were just talking about how either him or Isaiah Walker were wounded by the Creek Indians. And it seems like these people are moving because the Indians are making the move off the land or making the move from a specific point. And then eventually over time, they're starting to claim this land. So putting up these makeshift buildings. Because I don't know how you move a house a whole quarter of a mile down the road.
On a boat at that. Several times.
Go to Moon says, so what's the difference between immigrants and an immigrant? So which one was Walker? The difference between an immigrant and an immigrant is individuals that's moved off their land. Like what happened with the Trail of Tears when the Cherokee and the rest of the tribes were moved from Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, and moved to Oklahoma. That would be considered immigrant. The immigrants are individuals that come from another country and come to this land. Like for instance, if a bunch of us from, let's just say Virginia, were to go live in Russia, we would be Virginia or American immigrants with an I. So hopefully that helps. Doodle Vision says riverboat gambling. And the Digit 7 Rico says Isaiah though. So I'm sorry, no sellout. You could pick up with Rob Walker when you're ready.
Rob Walker. Like that.
1 2 1 2 live in effect. Chicka.
In 1819, Gunter lived on both sides of the river. He moved his house. Wait. No.
He lived on. Hold on.
This guy. Nah.
How you live on both sides of the river?
I don't know, man. I don't know. This guy. He got a twin or something.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It was all that moving. He had to dodge some arrows.
Duties just swim back and forth. I need something over there. Hold on. No, I done went to the wrong screen. Okay. Rob Walker. In 1819, Gunter lived on both sides of the river. He moved his houses about 300 or 330 yards down the river in who measured this? In 1819 to his ferry landing. His improvements then extended from his ferry up the river to within about 100 or 150 yards of the place for which he moved his houses. He lived south of the river since that time. In making the survey, the center was fixed at his houses. And I believe the center is the center of the reservation, is what they mean by that. Yes. David Park Hills. David Park Hills in 1819, Gunter had a house or lived north of the river about a fourth mile from his landing. In the same year, moved the houses to the landing, and at that time, his plantation extended to the ferry. He got better land by moving the houses, begin the center of the reservation. Has lived south of the river since 1819. Edmund Bridges. In 1819, Gunter and one of his wives lived south of the river, and one of his wives north of the river. Is that why he got someone else? His wife south of the river having died that year, he moved his north wife over to the south side when he had since lived.
Hold on, wait a minute.
You got a wife of the north and a wife of the south? What about the east side?
I don't know. The south wife. Man, I'm understanding, I guess, why he got a few houses, a few yards away from each other. In 1819, he moved his northern houses about a fourth mile down the river to his ferry landing and got better land. Edward Cox testified to the same effect as Bridges, except with respect to his wives. So somebody gossiping about something.
So I'm looking at the chat.
One is bro code, another is not bro code.
I can vouch for you, but I don't know about your wife. Antonio, the reason why we're talking, he said, man, why are we talking about this homo for an hour? This dude homeless just trying to live and getting shot and kicked off the porches. He got plight. But Antonio, this is one of the individuals that signed the Cherokee Treaty. So eventually, he got moved in. So that's what it boils down to. But it's just showing you how, it's giving you an example, and I'm glad that they'll sell out his readings, because it's giving you an example of how this land was actually squatted on the reservation and taken from these tribes. L.J. Free says E equals indigenous displacement, I equals moving to someone else's land, immigrant versus immigrant. Sorry to be so late, Golden.
Yeah, but that's the part that I caught in it, that he moving houses in the reservation to get better land.
Yeah.
And I need to know what his, what's a foldable house? A tent?
Apparently it was a makeshift, it's a makeshift structure.
A doghouse, I don't know.
Yeah, because I'm like, hold on, you just moving it from one side of the river to the across the river, back down the river, back up the river. Man, this is the most durable, movable house I ever heard of.
Copper Color Queen said the fact that it was allowed is beyond me, but hey, it was a different time. You got to realize too, Copper Color Queen, these individuals, and this is something that Bones had talked about. Remember that that 10 terabytes of information from the
National Archives,
from the National Archives, those ship records where they was paying people to come over here, or people was petitioning to come over here. So they were petitioning to come over here, and then these individuals were at one particular time doing what's it called? They were sharecropping. Well, after they were sharecropping and they served their time for paying for that ship, they end up squatting on reservations. You got to realize these tribes were allotted a lot of land after some of the other land got stolen. And you got to realize these tribes had a lot of people, but they had a lot more land. So it was nothing for these individuals just to be squatting in different parts of the reservation.
Yeah, what was it? 800,000 acres.
Yeah.
There's no way in the world you're gonna know every person that's on it. 800,000 acres. They went from the Mississippi to the Salt Flats. Yeah, people squatting all over the place. This is a squat party.
And that was one of the complaints that the tribes were having of the Europeans encroaching on their land. So they were seeking refuge from the government, but the government was, allowing it. So this is an example of how that was done. And if you think about it, how was it that this individual ends up being one of the signers of the treaty when he was actually squatting on land? That means he must have known the chiefs. I'm just saying.
Went from squatter to a chief overnight.
So he ended up marrying one of these empresses in the tribe, and he, like you say, went from a squatter to a chief, or his daddy went from a squatter to a chief.
But do anybody notice that a lot of the women at this time are already half-breeds that they're talking about? That, remember how we normally talked about how people be like, oh, the Aboriginal melanated woman and the European. When you reading this, you realize that they all mixed at this time.
Yep.
And remember, they was over here 200 years with the French. They've been mixing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Tego says the government had a lottery system for the land strictly for white folks, especially when there's gold. Well, Tego, you got it partially right, because at this time they're only considered white folks by the census. During this time, we're still classifying them by their location versus them being white or the language that they speak. So we're talking Dutch, Acadians, and other Europeans.
Yeah, that's something that we need to break down one day too, because I can see how that kind of blurred the lines during time. That when it comes to a lot of these so-called racial categories, that only deals with the census. And we got to remember that outside of the census, a lot of these categories do not exist, or not even used.
Right, because the enumerators were the ones calling these individuals these. These people weren't calling themselves that, because at this time, during the 1800s, there is no self-determination. And it got to the point during the early 1900s, started from 1920 through to 1960, it was illegal to self-determine, especially if you were a melanated Indian. So yeah, we'll definitely have to break that down. No problem, Tego. Just trying to help everybody understand the time frame that we're in, so we can be straight. But you bringing up some great points, so keep it up. We appreciate you. So no sellout. What I do is I'll pick it up from here.
I just read what No Sell I said. The original tiny homes. That's how he was moving.
Oh, it could have been, yo. It's on A2.
I really want to know what type of homes is this that you just pick it up and move it across the river.
Gotta go.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it they saying that they moving homes so they can claim all this land and all these people in cahoots together?
It's very possible.
Or they're already, standing homes and they just move from one home to the next home. It seems, I don't know.
Yeah, just moving in homes that's already put up on the property and stuff, and saying you put it up. It seems like this ain't nothing but a squatting case that they testifying for each other so they can get the land.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like. They got a team. And Doodle says Edward Scissorhands was skating around Cherokee land like Goldmember. So yeah, no seller. I'll pick it up from there.
All right, that'll work. Peace to the chat.
So let me see. Where was he? Where were you? Oh yeah. Edward Bridges in 1819 says Gunter and one of his wives live south on the river, and one of his wives lives north. And this is where we talk about the north wife and the south wife. So think about this. During this time, I bet you one of his wives are Indian, and the other wife might not be. And could that be the reason why Edmund Bridges could testify for one? Well, Edmund is testifying for 2 wives, where Edward Cox only testifies for one wife. Go ahead, Bones.
I know his one was Indian.
Go ahead, Bones.
He said he had a wife of the North and a wife of the South.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder which one stood the chance to be melanated. Just saying. And why, when I say that, I feel kind of Wizard of Oz.
Oh, like the Wicked Witch of the North and the Wicked Witch of the South?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody guessing. Doodle Vision says South Side. David says South Wife. Free says South. How do y'all know? No, Sala said there's actually a show on Cartoon Network with that title. Wow. So I'm going ahead and read a little further where it says 0654. This testimony, it appears that prior to 1819, Gunther had a ferry with Tennessee and lived and had plantations on both sides of the river, that in that year he moved his houses about a quarter of a mile down the river to his landing, but not out of improvements. By his removal, he has obtained better land. His house is now the center of the reservation. He has lived on the south side of the river, period. It is not alleged that he has abandoned his ferry for the use and occupancy of his northern houses and plantations, and the case seems to depend entirely upon the fact whether his having lived since 1819 on the south side of his ferry is sufficed to constitute a feeling of his right to this northern plantation. Edward Gunter. Exactly. Edward Gunter.
Ferries. My bad.
No, you good. That's fine. Do what you gotta do. Edward Gunter is one of persons named in the schedule referred to in the 3rd article of the Convention of 1819 Land Laws, page 169, to whose estates in fee simple are given. It says, State of Alabama, March 12, 1831, Jackson County. This day personally appeared before me, Mr. H.E. Wheeler, an acting justice of the peace in and for said county, Gilbreth Barton, Jeremiah Rodder, Jr., Benjamin Robert, Alexander Gilbreth, William McKee, James Edwards, I guess it's supposed to be senior or sent, Samuel Weber, William Manning, David Parkhill, Nathan Crockett, David Ricketts, Charles Corley, Robert Walker, Isaiah Walker, and George T. Reed, who being duly sworn the truth to relate respecting a reservation of land, said to have been taken by the said Edward Gunter, embracing 1 mile square of the north side of Tennessee River in the county of Jackson, and opposite the ferry the said Edward Gunter keeps on said river, and the said Mr. McKee states as following. So they are squatting, and these people are testifying on his behalf. And Mr. McKee states, I was living on the south side of the Tennessee River in the year of 1819, and in the spring of that year, Edward Gunter was living on the south side of the said river in what is now called the Cherokee Nation. But part of his family lived on this side of the river, and he tended some land on this side of the river in what is now called Jackson County. Or at least they said it was Gunther's corn, though I never seen him or working at the river by B. Smith. Do you know after the treaty was made public that Gunter pulled on his houses and moved them? And he pulled his houses down in the fall of the year of 1819 or 1820, though I believe it was in the 1819, and moved. So this person is testifying that he was living on one side, which was Cherokee Nation, and he was also living on the other side, which was now, think about this, and said it was now called Jackson County. So what was it called before then?
Not theirs.
So this is a time where they're starting to rename and rezone properties. And they're actually using these individuals to do the zoning, and they're squatting while they're zoning. That's how they were able to get on the reservation. And then he goes on to say, then something near 1/4 of a mile down the river to this ferry landing, quest by the same was not that there before. The reservation was surveyed by the public surveyor who came, though, this county for this purpose. Answer, it was some little time before I heard talk of its being surveyed, though I never seen it surveyed. Question, by the same, did not Mr. Gunther, by his moving of his house, make an exchange of a very mean piece of land for a very good piece? Answer, he got a first-rate piece of land for a very mean place, for the distance before measured extending 1 mile length. And the question goes, by the same, has Mr. Edward Gunther ever lived on this side of the river since he moved his houses? Answer, not as I know of. And the question reads, by the same, has it not been a talk amongst the people that Mr. Gunther defrauded the government by this removal of his house? Answer, I have heard folks say that he got a first-rate piece of land by his removal, and I always understood that the treaty confined them to make their house the center of their reservations. Question, by the same, did you ever hear Mr. Gunther say anything about the rumors of his houses? Answer, I don't recollect of ever hearing him say anything about them, but I seen him when he was moving. Question, but Edward Gunther was not. Question, but Edward Gunther was not my plantation lying at the ferry landing when he was the first acquainted at this place? So this is somebody who owns this land questioning about this land. So this guy's being cross-examined. I mean, I'm reading it, and it may sound a little janky because I'm trying to read it as it's written, which their English ain't that good. Free says, I think that all the time when reading their accounts, I'm misreading it. Sorry, Free. Grand Rising, Pamela Hall. So it seems like these testimonies are in reference to some of these tribal members who own this land are cross-examining, or their representatives are cross-examining these witnesses. And then it says, the first time that I ever was there, it was in the fall of 1816. And it was then that the woods and the cane track, and in the year 1819, I was there again. And your farm was then near about the ferry. And I think Ekman told me that he had hoped to clear that land, and it was cleared when I came back in 1819. And he told me that he had been keeping the ferry for you. See, he's talking to the person who actually owns this land. Now the question is coming from the person who owns this land that's trying to fight to keep it, because Gunther is a squatter. He says, by Gunther, is the ferry landing now at the same place that it was in 1816? Answer, I put in stock some distance above where the ferry land is now in that year when I cropped. But where you moved your house, it was the ferry landing in the year 1819. Question, by the same, those houses that you speak of, did you see them pulled down? Answer, I did not see them pulled down. Question, by the same, the plantation that was in the year of 1819, is it not the center of one side? Answer, I don't know. And it says, sworn to and subscribed before me this 12th day of March 1831, Mr. William McKee, his mark. So that he didn't know how to write. So apparently he didn't know how to read either. And this is the Honorable H.E. Will Seal, Justice of the Peace. And then it goes on to read that his Isaiah Walker's evidence. The first time, as well as my mind serves me, at this time I ever seen Edward Gunther was lying wounded, and I was told by the Creeks the instance. I think the 4th of 1814, the next time I seen him was living at what is called Gunther's Landing in the year of 1819. So we now know that it was actually Gunther who was wounded by the Creeks.
Around here all this quiet, he lucky he only was wounded.
Yeah, I wonder how many people were actually killed for squatting on some Indian land.
But you know, this remind me, it was probably about a month ago when we was reading about the squatters' rights.
Mm-hmm.
That because the Indians, they normally would leave an area for 10 years and let the soil and stuff go back.
Exactly.
And if these people set up shop and you didn't know, after so long, it became theirs. We actually seeing the application of it.
Exactly. L.J. Free said, whose land was it prior to him setting up shop? See, this is an example of what a sovereign citizen will eventually face as tribal lands are reclaimed. And you're exactly right, Free. When sovereign citizens start trying to take land, they're going to mess around and get their feelings hurt. Because that's what they're doing is squat. But like you were saying, Bones, these lands, you got to realize, as you know, and as the chat knows, there was a lot of land. They had acres, and they had tens of thousands of acres. So they could afford to leave a tract of land that was used for farming for 10 years so the soil can replenish. And when you know someone's migration patterns and you know how they operate because they've been doing this for thousands of years, it's easy to just wait for them to leave. So imagine you leave for 10 years and then go back to some land that you left 20 years ago, and then you see some structures on your land. So now you got to go to the state and be like, why are these people on my land? And now they got squatters' rights. So not only were these tribes dealing with fighting each other, fighting the Europeans, and they also got to deal with squatters. I see why they drank.
Not funny, but yeah.
Look, I won't try to be funny. Grand Rising, Marlon P. We're talking about
Peace.
Edward Gunter, who started out as a squatter and ended up signing a treaty on behalf of the Cherokees. That's crazy. So let me go ahead and read this cross-examination. It says, it was the 7th of February that I was there. Question by Gunther. Were you present when the survey... Okay, so this question is by Gunther. It says, were you present when the surveyor surveyed my reservation? Answer, I was. Question by the same. Did you not think where he made it the center, it was the center of my improvements? Answer, there was cleared land above and below, and the house was there where he made the center. Question by Gunther. Did you not go clear around with the survey when he ran it out? Answer, I did. So Gunther is making his case of why he should keep this land because he cleared it out, he's put up a structure there, and he got witnesses, Isaiah Walker being a witness. And he was sworn and subscribed on the 12th day of March, 1831, by doing it before the Justice of the Peace. So, there you have it. Yeah. Welcome, James Doodoo Vision. What's going on, brother?
Grand Rising. Peace.
Please share your wisdom with us.
Everybody wake up. Greetings to all.
Drop it like it's hot on.
Yeah, what you all are delving into was what we had talked about some time ago on when you hear all these stories of, Indians that think that they're African Americans because they were enslaved. It is these squatters that would come down, put stakes in the ground, name that county, and the people that were there, the Indians that were there, never moved, but then they got listed as slaves. This is what they were doing. The people were never moving. And this is a prime example of what was being done, and it was done all over the county. Also follow the breadcrumbs. So I put in the back chat. Follow the breadcrumbs that you're gonna start to see that Cherokee and Baptist are synonymous, and you're gonna see the Baptist movement move along with these so-called Cherokee, and why those that are called Cherokee today are a different group of people. These are these, as they keep putting in there, these mixed groups of people, and then those that were colonizers that are claiming to be Cherokee, and then everybody else that was indigenous to that land were listed as slaves. Just keep following the breadcrumbs. I yield the mic.
Yeah, we touched on that yesterday when we were talking. We was like, yeah, the people ain't moved. All they did was change the name of the land. That's it. Renamed it something.
So while they're squatting
Next
simultaneously,
thing you know, you was a citizen of this state.
so hold on, wait a minute. You mean to tell me that they're actually what we're seeing here is that these individuals are testifying that this land is now theirs because they're now changing the name of this property because it's in the center of the reservation, and they're saying this is my land because I cleared it. This is the name of it. It's called Jackson County, and the people that live on this land are now my slaves, and they're writing it down.
Yep, basically, right in front of our eyes, we watching this. We're reading through it.
So if you were in that land, like for example, if you're in the Carolinas and your tribe always dealt with tobacco, and if you're living in the Louisiana area, especially the southern part of Louisiana area, and your people dealt with sugarcane, then you turn around and if you're exchanging these goods and services, if you were always working tobacco, because that's what you did in exchange for that sugar cane, and then the colonizers would come, put their stakes in the ground, and say you're a part of this county, and you are a part of now Williams County, and you're a part of Johnston County, and they say, okay, well, I'll help you ship your tobacco to Louisiana, and they'll tell the people in Louisiana, I'll help you ship your sugar cane to the Carolinas, and now everyone that's working and have been working on that land, they are now your slaves, and now you're getting paid for what we have been doing for time immemorial. That's how they did it. There was no, you have to think of all the wars that were going on at that time. Think about the time frame that we were talking about now, dealing with Edward Scissorhands and all the rest of them. That time frame, all these wars that were taking place, how are they bringing thousands and millions of Africans over here while all this turmoil is going on simultaneously? I yield the mic.
Wow. Original.
Answers another question. How do you make a person continue to be a slave? They never know it. You never know that you're labeled as a slave. Why do you ever fight not to be considered one?
Nope.
That's why in the back of your mind, when people got upset about what Kanye West was saying, but you also have to look at that from this perspective. If that was the case, if all these people were being brought over here and forced to do something like that, why was no one rebelling and why was no one leaving? You're not going to leave your land because it's your land. Why would you leave? That's your home.
I say that all the time. When I overthrew their French occupation, if them people were so much from Africa, why they didn't hop on them boats and go back? And if they're so African, why is African still denying I-80 to be part of the African Union, telling them they're not African enough? What does that mean?
And as always, and as we are reading and information is being presented, this is going to be some very interesting and telling information. So let me go ahead and read this. Robert Walker evidence. When I was on the south side of Tennessee River, where I and brothers made a crop early in the fall of 1819, word came to me by father brother as source of the Mr. Gunther and Edward Gunther, was wanting me to go down and attend to the ferry until Edward Gunther could go to the council to talk that was on land in the Cherokee Nation somewhere. The reply with me was that I had to go to gather corn. And then he reads, then he says, before long, then some of them told me that a Negro should gather corn in my place. Then I readily consented to go and accordingly done so and stayed there until some time. I think late in January or quite
Hold on.
early. Go ahead.
Can you read that, please? I'm sorry. I was going to let it finish. I like, I just know I ain't hear what I thought I heard.
Before long, then, some of them told me that a Negro should gather corn in my place. Then I readily consented to go and accordingly done so and stayed there until some time. I think late in January or quite early February, but I do not exactly recollect. Close about that time, though, I think this was the months of the year 1820, but sometime before this, the reservation was surveyed by the surveyors and his hands. And here's a question by Book of Sam. Was you acquainted with Edward Gunter's place of residence in the year of 1819? Answer. I believe he held a place of residence on both sides of the river. Question. Do you know of Mr. Gunter's pulling down his house and moving things from his residence on the north side of the river, and how far do you suppose he did move them? Answer. I believe he pulled them down and moved them something near 330 or 40 yards. Question. Did you assist Mr. Gunter in the removal of the houses? Answer. I did. I don't now recollect. If I did, I do not recollect. So it's interesting how he said that a Negro should gather corn.
Who was considered a Negro in 1820? I'm just saying. Who was considered a Negro in 1820?
Indians. And they are on a reservation.
And at no time, y'all notice, we started in the 1500s with this, right?
Yep.
With 16, yeah, 15. We're now in the 1800s. Nan mentioned a Nan ship coming from the other continent. I'm just saying.
Hold up.
Dropping none of us off.
Hold up. Okay. Okay.
And how they get a ship from that other continent, get on these shores, and then trek across the land to get all the way into Tennessee.
Free says, where did he come from? When did he ever get to the river? When did he get to the other side of the river? Remember, he had a ferry.
Yeah, yesterday when we broke down everything the Cherokee got, we been stated this. Do not believe nobody was walking across the country. No. People had ferries, little Frigidaires, trains. We are in the 1800s.
So let's go ahead and finish seeing what this witness had to say on Mr. Gunther's behalf. Before long, then some of them told me, okay, I already read that. He says, the question said, did you assist Mr. Gunter in the removal of the house? Answer, if I did, I don't now recollect. And it says, I might or might not, but I recollect that him, house, there were my notes. Question. By the same, was you not there at the time of the removal of this? Were you not there at the time of this removal in the employ of Mr. Gunther, Edward Gunter's? Answer, I was. Question. Did Mr. Gunther ever express to you the reason or object he had in moving them houses? Answer. If he did, I don't recollect. So what they're trying to establish is, was he told? Did he move those houses because he was told, or did he move those houses because he was trying to get a better spot? And so the witness is saying, I don't recollect, even though the witness was there.
How do you not remember moving a house?
He says, if he did, I don't recollect. Did not Mr. Gunther gain by his removal of his house a very excellent piece of land in lieu of a very indifferent piece of distance that you stated he moved them houses the full length of his reservation? Answer. I had much rather have it. Question by the same. What has been the language of the people on the subject of this removal? I have never heard anything said about this removal, but I have heard people say that he moved more than land his right they expected. Question. Where did the principal part of Mr. Gunther's plantation lie on the north side of Tennessee River at the time he moved his houses? Answer. I think it extended from the ferry landing that now is upwards to within 100 and 150 yards of the place that he moved his houses from. Then it goes on to read, question. Do you know of Mr. Gunther's living on the reservation since the year 1819? Answer. He does not. Question. By the same. Was not Mr. Gunther's residence been on the south side of the Tennessee River in Cherokee Nation ever since the year 1819? Answer. He has ever since the time of his moving those houses. By Edward Gunther. Did my plantation lie? Okay, so this is a question by Edward Gunther. Did my plantation lie at the ferry landing at the time that you lived with me? Answer. The ferry landing was near the low corner of your field, but there was a small field some distance below the creek, something like 200 yards to the nearest part of it. Question. Was you present when this place was surveyed by the surveyor? Answer. I was. Question. Where did he make the center of the survey? Close to the ferry landing, top of the bank by the house. He ran his line from there up the river until it came near the place where you moved your houses from, and I understood from some of the company that he was afraid of running in the river before he got his quote. And angled then he run the same course over the ridge and connected in some sides before he got on the river and went.
Why does it sound like organized squatting to me?
Yeah, because you got a surveyor surveying the land and running it from a
squatters.
Yeah.
But isn't this the part when they started writing up land patents and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
If you could go back a few lines where he was asked about the people, maybe like what the people were saying about the land. It was a question.
He said, "What was the language?"
It was a question about the people. What the people were saying about the land. It was kind of I know it was like broken English, but it's just a few lines back.
Hold on.
But the question was about the people and him taking land and what he heard, or what he might have heard the people say.
Oh, it says, oh, okay, let me go. It says, did not Mr. Gunther gain by his removal of his houses a very excellent piece of land in lieu of the very indifferent piece, the distance that you stated he moved from the houses the full length of his reservation? Answer. I had much rather have it. That's probably not what he said. Or he probably said I'd much rather not say, but by the same, what was the language of the people on the subject of his removal? Answer. I have never heard anything said about this removal, but I have heard people say that he had more than land his right they expected. Question by the same. Where did the principal part of Mr. Gunther's...
That part right there. That's what I was talking about. I said it did say he had more land than right.
Yeah.
Sounds like he's taking more land than he needed.
Right.
Okay. No, I just wanted to point that out that's what the people were saying.
Yeah. So we're actually witnessing how slavery actually took place, and it's documented. You got one mention of a Negro that's supposed to deal with the corn on a reservation, but it was never called a slave, just a Negro.
Mm-hmm. And you notice a lot of the stories when we're reading about this, they say the slave and the Negro are separated. Refer to them as two different titles at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And still no mention of sending and bring nobody over here as no slave from no other landmass. So who's the slaves again?
And also during this time, these people were referring to each other from where they were from, because all these people at this time, you were either native born or you were an immigrant. They're not calling each other names or describing themselves based off of the census. They're describing these individuals based off of where they're from.
Yeah, because the census at this time was what, 1790? What, there was 3 categories. This is 1820, 1830. I think by now they're adding 2 more categories. And like we said again, how people were identified on the census is not how you identify yourself during your daily life. That's only for census, for allotment of land, or knowing how many people here, who need what resources and where. That's all the census is.
Free says they're trying to manifest their own destiny. Well, it looks like they did a pretty good job of that, Free. That's for sure. So these land surveyors were working in conjunction with the squatters. So all this is going on while these Indians are actually working on the land. So they're literally taking the land right from up under their feet and making them slaves right as they're working. That's crazy. Because there's not one mention of slave in this land. If you look at this, there's not one mention of slavery. There's not one mention of somebody tilling the land. And we talking about acres. He's moving the house. He's got houses and ferries. Normally when a man of prominence has this much land, does he or does he not at this time have slaves to work the land? According to what history teaches.
Well, history would tell you, yeah. But you don't hear him moving no people, none of that.
He had 2 wives. He had a wife in the north and he had a wife in the south on Cherokee land. And on the other side of the river, which was the south side of the river, it was changed to Jackson County. Who named it Jackson County? But that's a whole other story. The surveyor actually named it Jackson County. And Jackson County just happened to be buttressed up against his land, where he had just moved it.
Coincidence? Think not.
There's no Native American word for coincidence.
That's another wow.
So I'm gonna continue to read a little bit more. This is interesting.
To say the least.
And I want to thank Doodle Vision for coming in and giving a Choctaw perspective. See, that is the benefit of being able to tie to your tribe and know exactly what happened based on the Indians' perspective because they were there. So this is a question of go ahead.
Stupid. He said maybe he's a realtor builder, all them houses he had.
I don't know. It says, do you know of Mr. Gunther's living on the reservation since 1819? And then it says he does not. By the same, has not Mr. Gunther's residence been on the south side of the Tennessee River in the Cherokee Nation ever since the year 1819? Answer. He has never since the time of his moving the house. Question. Edward Gunther did. Oh, Edward Gunther answered question. Did my plantation lie at the very land at the time that you lived with me? So this individual was living with him. And so I'm going to move down further because I already read that part. And it says, round until he came to the river, questioned by cross-examiner. Did you not think at the time that he placed the improvement as well as the center as he could have done it? Answer. I think that he was particular in placing the compass in the center of the door of the house he removed and the ferry landing. So David Parkhill's testifying now. He states on the oath that he removed to the state of Alabama in the year 1819 and landed at Gunther's Landing. And at the time, Edward Gunther lived or had a house on the north side of Tennessee River, something like 1/4 of a mile above the ferry landing, claimed by him, and in the same year moved his house down to the landing and was ever since lived on the south side of the river near said landing and in Cherokee Nation, and by removing his house and making the center of the reservation claimed by him on the north side of the river. So he's staking claims using a surveyor. Then it goes on and reads, I have frequently heard the settlers say that Edward Gunter had, by removing his house from where they were originally built to the place where he built them near the ferry landing, he defrauded the government of the United States and thereby gotten a piece of land in breadth of the distance he removed his house, and in the length 1 mile of the first-rate quality of land, instead of the same quantity of inferior land he otherwise would have gotten if he had not removed his house, and in his opinion, by so doing, he was departed from the spirit of the treaty. There you go. So he's got witnesses against him. This says, question by Edward Gunther. Was there not a plantation on the north side of the river at the ferry landing at the time? Answer. I think there was, that extended as low as the landing. Question by Gunther. Those houses you speak of being removed, did you ever see them removed? Answer. I did not. Question by Gunther. The ferry landing and the improvement, don't you believe them to be about the center of the reservation? Answer. I do not know, but I've always understood. There were as near the center as practical. Then there's a question by Smith, who is cross-examining. Was the house there before mentioned shortly after the treaty demolished and removed away? Answer. I think it was in the year of 1819. They were removed from where I was seeing them. Question by the same. When you first moved to the country, did you see any houses at the ferry landing? Answer. I do not recollect by my impressions if there was any there. Now here's this goes to let you know that these people are immigrants. He says, wait a minute, go ahead. It says, when you first moved to the country, did you see any houses at the ferry landing? It says, I do not recollect by my impressions is there was not any there. So these are people that are being moved in. So these immigrants were actually working in conjunction with these squatters as witnesses.
It would make sense, because how else would the United States be able to start acquiring all this land? Remember, they only had 13 colonies. And it seems like a lot of these squatters turned around to be predominant people later on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Successful. A lot of them had high positions in the government. Some of them became governors, got their own towns.
So here's a question. Because this individual started out as a squatter and ended up signing a treaty on behalf of the Cherokee.
That's the puzzling part.
Well, is it? Because if you think about it, at this time, Williams, was it Henry Williams, who was the chief? This is his people's land, and he's the chief, and he's aware of this. And he could have easily stopped it. Or he could have spoken against it. Because you got to remember, this land was not supposed to have been taken or messed with. And they're asking from the standpoint of, is this a violation of the treaty? Because what they're doing is they're understanding when these treaties are signed. And so, because you got to remember, when these treaties are signed, the chiefs and the people that are actually signing the treaties, they're not signing the treaties on their own land. They're going to Washington, or they're going to different areas. So they're leaving to go sign these treaties. Isn't that enough time for a surveyor to come in with these immigrants and squat? I'm just asking.
Especially if you're telling, think about what we read yesterday. The United States government said they wasn't going to come out to meet the tribes where they at, that the representatives had to come to Washington.
That ain't no 30-minute trip. That's a couple of days. Pamela Hall says, so what you're saying, they came here not to work with our people, but to take everything they had for themselves. Yeah.
No, we also got to remember who these people are, too. These people are them Native Americans. What I mean by Native Americans, them first set of foreigners that was born in America that had no allegiance to no tribes and no allegiance back to no foreign entity.
Well, the squatters are, but their witnesses are the immigrants that are going to eventually benefit and get some of this land that they're helping steal. I think that's what Pamela is asking.
Yep.
Free says that's like going to the newest person on the block to make a decision for the entire established neighborhood without anyone else's consent. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Because also think about it. What did the tribes give these firstborn Native Americans the right to do? To identify as what?
Native Americans.
As a tribe, right?
Yeah.
They allowed them to identify as a tribe. So could that be like how we hear in the language on how they mean in reservation, you bringing people to live in because they're identifying as a tribe?
Right.
Just, just a random thought off the information we're going through.
And because they're identifying as a tribe, they're being taken in by the Cherokee on this land. And while they're being taken in by these Cherokee, what's happening, or what appears to be happening, is that there are still immigrants coming over who are under the auspice or the guise of helping these quote-unquote Native Americans. And while they're helping, they're also helping them steal land. Because remember, the tribes, the American Indians themselves they don't claim land. They just rotate the crops based off of the season and what they need to grow. So they're not really paying attention to what's going on. They're just going about what they've always done. But you got these individuals that are here that are squatting on this land with surveyors, and they got witnesses. And so once these surveyors and these witnesses who were immigrants come in and take the land and verify that they've been on this land for so many years, now they're able to give these witnesses land. So think about it, you coming from a country where you didn't have anything. You come work on this land for 7 years, and then you help them acquire this land, so now it ain't nothing for them to give you an acre. Because you've helped them steal a couple of 100 acres. Because every time you move the land, think about this, because he was on the creek. So the creek is going to buttress the land point. So every time you move that property, let's say you're moving it east of the creek, don't you change the center of the reservation?
Every time.
So every time you move it out, you increase the amount of land.
And listen to what they're calling it, a reservation. And it may also answer the question to why when you're reading about some of these people, it seemed like they popped out of nowhere. Because, it's not too much of their backstory. Because most likely these are the first sets that were born here. Well, not the first set, were the sets that started wanting to do their own thing.
That's possible.
Because remember what we read earlier? His wife and their mother and their parents, they all mixed. Ain't none of these people what you would consider melanated Indians.
What they call full blood.
Yeah, all of them are half breeds. That's how they referring to them as mixed breeds.
So here's a question. Let's just say this individual who's a witness, right? He's an immigrant. His name is David Parkhill. He ends up getting this land that Gunther gives him a piece of land, right? In this county. Now, this county buttresses up against Cherokee Nation. What's stopping this immigrant from doing the same thing, going back into Cherokee Nation and squatting? Because the Indians are already familiar with him. They know what he looked like. So they're not really paying him any attention. So what's to keep him from going in with surveyors and getting him some land after he's already been given some land that's sitting right next to this border of Cherokee Nation land? You see what I'm saying? Couldn't he do the same thing?
Trying to make sure we got the same dude I just looked up. He died in 1881.
You talking about
David Goodner Parkhill.
Yeah, David Parkhill, yeah.
Later on, he became a reverend. Here comes the Reverend David Goodner Parkhill. See, I was remembering things on who they sent, what immigrants they requested to come over. You remember? They sent all them religious leaders to come over first and start getting land and building up all these churches and schools.
Mm-hmm.
So son just told me to go look this dude up real quick.
And right, wasn't he given 20 pounds for every person he converted?
They converted. Yes, they were. The reason why I said that, because I'm wondering, why would this dude be speaking up for him? What's his benefit? Who is he?
So he brings him over to help him acquire this land. And once he gives him this land, then he can build his church on this land. And then they can indoctrinate the Indians. Now we know why these chiefs were reaching out to these ministers.
Got some more. He was captain of the Montagues Mounted Rifle Company. On October 26, 1859, he was also a Cumberland Presbyterian minister.
All right, let's be nice out there in the chat. Not all Christians are thieves and whatnot. So let's be easy. So basically what it boils down to is like these individuals that are testifying, some of them are a part of the clergy. Which makes them what? Credible witnesses, right?
Yep. That's what made me start looking, because I was like, hold on, they're not just going to call anybody in here to be a witness. It would have to be somebody that has, you get what I'm saying, some type of standing.
That is mind-blowing. So
because if not, why wouldn't the Indians just challenge them? You get what I'm saying? It would have to be some type of figure to where they felt like they had to show some type of respect or something. Mm-hmm. That's the only thing I can think of. I'm like, we in court, you trying to tell me my land is your land. Man, the stuff that's gonna fly out of my mouth.
So now we know, now we have an idea how some of these churches end up getting on some of these reservations.
Wow.
I mean, this document is an example of how this could have happened. You have native-born Americans who are considered a tribe get taken in by a tribe, aka Cherokee. They have some land, or they're living on the land, because remember, tribes don't claim land, so they're residing on this land. Then they start to bring in surveyors to survey this land, while the tribes are actually going about their business, not paying attention to what's going on or working. And then they squat on the land, bring in immigrants to help them squat on the land, and then testify that this land is theirs, while changing the center and getting as much land as possible. Once the land has been renamed and a county has been created, they then give those immigrants land. Those immigrants then, in turn, if they're religious or clergy, set up a church, and then they do the same thing with the land. And they bring over immigrants. That's why we hear the tribes getting upset about these what they call the whites coming in and taking and encroaching on their land. This is how they was doing it, and that's why the land patent, what you say, the land patent and the squatters' rights. Why would you give these individuals squatters' rights when you already signed a treaty that said your land was going to be protected?
Yep. Remember, the ones that went to go sign the deal was just representatives of the tribes. And what did these representatives look like?
Them.
Matter of fact, ain't the dude one of the representatives that signed the treaty in the end?
Well, yeah, Gunther is. LJ Free says, allow me to clarify. Syncretism equals amalgamation or attempted amalgamation of different religious cultures or schools of thought. And then Golden Moon breaks into song. This land is your land, this land is my land, from California.
Yeah,
just popped in my head.
But now ask yourself, why did they bang that in our memories like that? Why? Why did they do it?
To indoctrinate us. Because it was being done right in front of our faces. Pamela Hall says, see, like I said, even though tribes don't claim that they were using that land and they had possession of the land, so they were stealing. And Free says it's not simply about religion. It's a package deal with dismantlers, a people's way of life, and impose a new way of life, which never works out well for the indigenous people involved.
But think about how they smoothed it over with a lot of the indigenous people. This is where your Indian agents come in.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? They're around the melanated tribes and stuff, telling them, showing them the European fashions and cultures, giving them the liquors, the beer, the rum and stuff. So it was never one type of attack. It was attack on multiple fronts and not always physical. It was the attack on ideology, the ancestral ways with this new flashy, so-called feel-good lifestyle that a lot of our people jump to, sad to say.
Well, if you think about it, because like you said, they were attack on multiple fronts. If you're under the guise that the reason why the government is not working with them because the the pure blood chiefs or melanated chiefs, one, have no intentions on learning the language. Two, are very stubborn as far as what they're willing to do versus what they're not willing to do. And then all of a sudden you have the women start ushering in their sons who are mixed, because the women chiefs or empresses who choose the chiefs are mixed. And they start to bring their sons in who have been educated by their fathers in these schools. And then they start bringing in these clergymen to teach their children the melanated, the mulatto children. So then you have these mulatto kids coming in there because they're on a plantation. They're raised not only by their uncles, who would be their mom's brothers, but they're also being educated by their father's schools. So they're in both worlds. So they're accepted by both sides. So then the melanated Indians are like, okay, well, we see that you got a pretty good relationship, so let's see about putting you in power to see if this is going to be beneficial to us. Everybody got screwed.
Yep. About sums it up.
So slavery was on paper.
Yeah.
So if I label you a slave and you don't know you're being labeled as a slave, that's why you don't leave. 1, because it's your land. 2, because you didn't know you was being labeled a slave. And 3, you didn't realize that you were now working in Jackson County, Alabama. You thought you was working on your plantation.
Yeah, because once you break down a lot of these so-called slave revolts, what you tend to find out, they were labor disputes.
Mm-hmm.
People were mad over the labor conditions on what they were receiving or wasn't receiving. But history will tell you they were slave revolts. Till you dig it up and read it for yourself. You're like, hold on, man.
And this is in Alabama, where a reservation is, where plantations are supposed. Because this is called a plantation, right? That's what he's calling it. He's mentioned it as a plantation several times. Why he's talking about his plantation? Why are his slaves not moving his property? Why is his slaves not moving these houses? Why is it immigrants that's living with him moving these houses? Don't you get slaves to do that for you? Why would you be putting your hands on some property when you got some people that's supposed to be slaves doing it? I'm just asking a question.
Good question.
Golden Moon says, how can a person convince a group of people to buy a $65 million G6 Ferrari truck? He says, tell you what, never mind, that's off topic. He's talking about the church. Again, not all Christians are corrupt, Golden Moon. People have the right to their own religious beliefs. Our goal is not to tell people what they should be or what their religious organization should be. It's just to help people find their tribe. That's it. So let's be respectful. Not saying that you're disrespectful, but we want to keep it respectful. So
and then we also said these people got ties with Joseph Brant too.
Of course they would. Why wouldn't they have ties with Joseph Brant? They run in the same circles. They are all wealthy, what they call mixed Indians who are wealthy. I think I said wealthy twice. Redundant. Never mind. So this is I'm speechless and I'm irritated at the same time.
All I'm doing is scratching my head still, like, wow.
So then you have Richard Lee-Lagarian, clerk of county court for the county and state, aforesaid do certify that William H.E. Wheeler, whom now appears subscribed to the within certified, is and was at the time of subscribing the same an acting justice of the peace, and for the said county of Jackson duly commissioned and qualified as such, and the full faith and credit is and should be given to his official acts as such. In testimony, I therefore have sworn in, I have within signed my hand and affixed my provided seal, there being no seal of affair of the office of billions, this 23rd of March in the year of our Lord 1831. Then it goes on to say, this day personally appeared before me Mr. H.E. Wheeler, acting justice of the peace in and for said county, Edward Cox and Edmund Bridges, who being duly sworn the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, to relate respecting a reservation of land said to have been taken by the said Edward Gunter, embracing 1 mile square of the north side of Tennessee River in the county of Jackson, and opposite the ferry the said Edward Gunter keeps on said river, and said Edmund Bridges being first called states. I was living on the south side of the Tennessee River in the year 1819. Gunter lived up the same side of the river in what is now called the Cherokee Nation. But there lived a woman on this side of said river, which is on the north side, in what is now Jackson County, which was said by same people to be one of said Gunter's 2 wives. Think she lived near 1/4 of a mile above the ferry landing, then known by the name of Gunter's Landing. The other woman, in which was said to be his other wife, lived on the south side of said landing with him sometime 1819. The woman on the south side died, and Mr. Gunter removed the woman from the north side over to the south side, where I believe he has lived ever since. I have still lived in the neighborhood of A Landing ever since the year 1819. In the fall of that year, Mr. Gunter removed his house near 1/4 of a mile down said river, opposite his ferry landing, at or near the lower part of the improvement, which is said to be some who profess to know was made the center of the south side of his reservation, and if it was according to my understanding of the treaty which granted reservation to said Gunter, the said Gunter got a very valuable tract of land in place of the very rocky, barren tract, the full extent in which, and 1 mile in the length of the distance that he removed his houses down said river, and according to knowledge I have of the boundary claimed by reservation by said Gunter, the place where the houses now stand was made the center. Then Smith asked him a question: was the removal of the house before or after the treaty was concluded and made public? It was after. Question: has not Edward Gunter lived on the south side of Tennessee River ever since the treaty was concluded in the year 1819 between the United States and the Cherokee Nation? And answer: he always has lived on the south side and said river since 1819. So basically what it looks like is that Jackson County was land that was ceded to the United States. And there was basically a line drawn. And Gunther had land on that side and basically trying to encroach on the Cherokee land, starting basically on the other side of the river. He's trying to move into the Cherokee land. That's why they asked, did he move before or after the treaty was signed? They said it was after it was signed. So it was moved after it was signed. Then I'm guessing, I ain't gonna guess, so we just continue to read, but I don't know.
Yeah, I had to just sit down and cool off for a second.
Free says, it's all good, Golden Moon. Like I said, we just gotta make sure we we understand how pissed everybody can be, but making, we can't be making blanket statements, because at the end of the day, we wouldn't want nobody to make blanket statements against us. And apparently, blanket statements against Indians is what's been done. Savages and the like. So
It's just still amazing me that this rising, we're actually reading one of the documents that's showing and stating how this was done.
I know, right?
And I don't know, it's like part of me get mad because I'm like, people were bold enough to document the hijack and save it.
Well, again, Bones, just like I do. You have to document it, because if you don't, it never happened. So if it's not documented that this land belonged to Gunter, anybody can come back and say, well, you stole the land. Well, no, I got it fair and square according to the laws. Well, we now know that these laws were made so you could steal the land. So it's a double-edged sword.
I'm like, woo.
Grand Rising Macadon 1. Free said TMA just made me delete the message I was typing. My bad, Free. But this is. I wonder how many. Well, I'm sure there are a lot more reservation land grant. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bones.
The way I'm looking at this, to pull this whole thing off, you didn't need that many. All you needed was these so-called 5 civilized tribes. Think about it. If you look at the land that's allotted to these 5 civilized tribes, that's all you needed to get on the side with you. And ain't them 5 are the ones that got the deals and all that from the United States government first? They got the best of the best?
Yeah.
Just saying.
And they end up moving out west, and the heavily melanated tribes, or the heavily melanated, aka full-blooded Indians, end up being left behind because they didn't want to move, because apparently they knew what was going on and they didn't want no part of it, which is the reason why the Choctaw got split, which is where Doodoo Vision is from.
Yeah, that's that dude that set everybody up in Mississippi.
So, but we're actually witnessing how this took place. So this land is being stole right from up under them before they were moved out west. So they was going to lose this land anyway. Now the question is, did the chiefs know it? Because Gunther is one of the people that signed the treaty. So if he did this, he knew what was being done when he was representing the tribes. So it seems like the only thing they was doing was holding out just long enough to get more money for the removal. Because remember, the original proposal by Andrew Jackson was $200,000 for everything that the Cherokee owned east of the Mississippi. We know that eventually they end up giving $5 million to the Cherokee Nation for that same said land. So they held out, basically driving up the price of the value.
And then also the Cherokee boost their numbers to even get more, because at this time they took on the Delaware tribe as Cherokee. If I'm right, it was a Shawnee tribe they took on as Cherokee. They accepted 6,000 so-called whites as Cherokee. The 1800s, man.
They also took on a Sequoia.
Yep.
Because that's where this came from, the Sequoia Nation Research Center, Collections and Archives.
Just a mixture of a whole bunch of different people, and basically they was accepting it to get numbers up so they can drive up the price, because then they get paid for every person that moved. And it wasn't like an uncomfortable move. They relocated people's houses, furniture, even set it aside on a time schedule so when the rivers rose up, they can use the steamboats to move the furnitures and stuff out there.
Yeah, that was put in the treaty. Yeah.
The negotiator was negotiating for himself or their sales.
Yeah, happy Father's Day to all the fathers. Go to Moon, put that. Thank you. Go to Moon, same to you. So,
Grand Rising Oak Cliff Tiff.
yeah, this I was not prepared for this.
Made me wish I would have read this one ahead of time.
Well, I didn't put it in the chat until like 3 o'clock this morning, so that was my fault.
No, I probably would have been steaming the whole night.
I mean, this is.
Y'all wondering why the back chat blinging.
But we actually are witnessing how someone goes from being a squatter to a signer on a treaty.
Mm-hmm.
It says, because this is Booker Smith and John Gilbreth versus Edward Gunter. So apparently Booker Smith and John Gilbreth were said to have owned this land first. And I'm thinking that Smith and Gilbreth were Cherokee. Pamela Hall says, like I said, stealing for their selfish ways. Well, it's documented, so we can do something about it.
That's where genealogy comes in. Unlock that door to walk back in.
I mean, this is crazy. For those of you who are just now coming in, we are Copper Color Queen says, I'll have to listen again since my headphones weren't charged. No worries. For those of you who are just now coming in and listening, we were actually doing a bio, if you will, of all the individuals on the Cherokee side that signed the treaty that ended up leading to the Trail of Tears, the Treaty of 29 December. And what we discovered is that Edward Gunter was originally a squatter. Ed Gunter was a squatter who went from being a squatter and taking some of this Cherokee land to being a representative of the Cherokee Nation and signing said treaty. So he was in part responsible for enforcing the Cherokee tribe to leave. And I say that because he wasn't the only one coming in squatting on this land. So you got the squatters coming in. The squatters are also bringing in immigrants who are witnessing and speaking on their behalf. And apparently these are prominent people based off of the ship documents that they were clergymen who were men of good standing, who when they testified, you had to respect it. One individual in particular, where's his name at? Not Willard. David Parkhill.
Oh, don't forget the Reverend David Parkhill.
Is testifying that Gunter not only had land on the north side, which is now Jackson County, after the Treaty of 1819, but he also had land in Cherokee Nation. And he was squatting. So these individuals who were immigrants who were speaking on his behalf are vouching for him. And it just so happens that after he got awarded his land, David Parkhill ends up building a church and also having land.
Yeah, I posted his genealogy in the chat for David Parkhill.
Come on, man. Grand Rising, Carrie. And we had Doodle Vision come in and explain to us while this was happening simultaneously, this is how, while they was changing and putting in stakes in the ground, claiming that these Indians that were working on this land were actually slaves. But there is nothing in this document that talks about slaves on these plantations that are being stolen. It makes one mention of a Negro dealing with corn, but it doesn't say he was a slave. So we're witnessing an actual document that contributed to the genocide of a tribe. And the immigrants helped do it, along with the tribal leaders. I don't know what to say, Bones. I'm just a tad bit annoyed.
Mm-hmm. Oh, correction. The first Parkhill wasn't Reverend. It was his son that's the Reverend.
Okay.
Yeah, they both named Parkhill.
Mm.
But it shows nothing before Massachusetts for the David Parkhill we're talking about now, the father.
This is crazy. LJ Free says, Negro dealing with corn, they know they simply referring to the maize people, the maize. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm about to stop here. Yeah, I'm done for right now, bro.
No, I feel you, because it's like, wow.
For those that let me go ahead and put this in the chat. For those that want to read further and glean some more information, please do so. If we're misreading this or misunderstanding this, please let us know. But it looks like a serious theft, and they had lots of help. It was an inside and outside job. Because you can't tell me that the chiefs didn't know that Gunther was doing this, because his name had to have come up. There's written documentation, and these chiefs can speak and read English, so they were aware.
But the funny thing is, what positions did these chiefs get later on?
They
become governors and politicians.
Mm-hmm.
So it's showing that they had to be aware of it.
I was not expecting this information, and thanks again to Doodle Vision, who's Choctaw, who basically shed some light on exactly how, in this instance, and probably many other instances, our people were made slaves. because you have immigrants, you have Native Americans who were born here, who were absorbed by the Cherokee tribe. They were able to come onto the land, get land, and then after the treaty was signed, start encroaching on reservation land that had already been ceded to the Cherokee. While they were squatting on this land, they had help of immigrants who had petitioned to come over here, and some ended up being clergy, vouch for these squatters. Then the squatters get the land, and then the immigrants get land as well, and they continue the whole process. So you have the tribes being forced not only by the government to cede the land, but the government is not stopping, but they're encouraging these squatters to encroach on land that was already being ceded based off of the treaty. That's how you have squatters' rights. Copper Color Queen says, I was listening to a video earlier this morning where one host stated that the Mexicans coming into America need to do so as her ancestors done in order to take the land and the resources. This info is needed because it's the same tactics being done today.
But it's funny how we talk about the chiefs, the ones that had to know, and it just made me fast forward. The Civil War happens a couple of years later down the line after this.
Yep, 1860 and 1865.
All right, so after the Civil War, the South, you had a large influx of melanated politicians. Where did these people come from? How did they know the government and the politics and stuff so fast? Could they be melanated chiefs and stuff from particular areas that went on to politics in the South? Because I'm thinking, who else would have the ability to be doing this?
Right, because they would have to know the language. They would have to know how politics is ran from the United States perspective, not from how their tribes are ran. Because the tribes are ran differently than the politics is run. That's the reason why the melanated, or what you call the full-blood chiefs, were having problems dealing with the government. Because they was like, we see how you're doing it, we don't like it. So that does make sense.
Like how we always ask, what happened to a lot of these tribes and a lot of these people? As we read and we see, they became citizens.
Yeah, the ones that became prominent citizens that end up having land and then titling the people that was working on their land that they end up getting because of squatting or because the land was given to them. And the people that was working on that land never knew that the land had changed ownership. So they were listed as slaves.
And especially if you come from a culture to where you're not working for monetary value. It's just a solid for a solid, meaning, okay, like we said earlier, I'm growing sugar, you growing corn. So we're trading, you know what I'm saying, corn and sugar. So yeah, you wouldn't even notice it.
Right. So then you have somebody, like you said, come in to be the middleman. Hey, I'll help you move this corn so you can get your sugar.
And the whole time they making a profit off of it.
And then eventually the workers find out. Then they get upset. And
labor strikes, relabeled as
slave revolts.
But it's labor strikes.
Well, we answered the question of how it was done because that's always been the question. How, if it wasn't slavery, then how did they end up getting this land? How did they end up getting these people on this land, and why weren't these people leaving? Well, they wasn't leaving because, one, they didn't realize the land was being taken from them because they don't understand the stakes in the ground, which Doodoo Vision calls the Red Stick Wars. You're changing the name of the states and the counties right up under the people's feet while they're working. They're not paying attention to what you're doing. They're working. So then they go from working on some land that belongs to their tribe to working on a plantation. They didn't change what they was doing. The nature of the property changed right up under their feet, literally. Just like you leave to go to work and you come back and your house is there, but the name of the street has changed. Pamela says, okay, I have to go pick up grandson from school. Peace all. Enjoy your day and be safe. Thanks, Pamela. Don't forget, we have to get with you to do your community spotlight. So reach out to us and let us know when you're available.
And it also answers the question. A lot of people be like, how a small handful of immigrants with an eye keep 20, 30, 40 people on a plantation in check. Well, it's easy if nobody realized that you're, wow. Just think about it. They tell you that they had slave quarters, that these people still had houses and stuff in these areas, was just working on these farms. Basically, like we said, these people came and put their houses in the middle of where we were staying already.
Yep. Now here's a question.
Using the same mechanism that in 2019, HUD Section 3, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Building around us and getting the benefits.
And it's interesting because if you need an example of it, how many people have lived in a county, right? And it's small, but it's still a representative of it. Like I can remember when I was living in Hampton, Virginia, the area code was 804. I joined the military. I come back, and the area code is now 757. Now, only reason I know that it changed because 1, I'm literate, and 2, I know the phone number. But they didn't ask us if they could change the area code. They changed the area code. How many times you've been living somewhere and the jurisdiction has changed, or the name of the county has changed, or the name of a crossroad has changed?
You ain't go nowhere.
You didn't go anywhere, but things got changed right up under you.
Like Chief Warhorse said, went to bed in Florida, woke up in New Orleans.
So it's the same thing that's happening. It's just happening using a different mechanism, and we're aware of it because we read and we understand that we have the media. Think about the redistricting that goes on doing politics. What do you think they're doing that for?
Gerrymandering the districts to make sure the same problem they had with us in 1906, they stay ahead of it. That's why they always try to suppress the vote, because they know realistically, if we was really active, it only takes 30% of us. And 30% of us will shift the whole tide when it comes to voting. And people would be like, oh, how electoral college? No. I'm talking about voting on these local levels where it really counts, where you can change where you reside. It makes a world of a difference.
So I was just trying to give you examples of how that happens, because I know some people are like, well, how is that possible? It's still happening. It has never stopped happening. We're just used to it. We don't pay any attention. And because we speak the language, we understand the language, and there are outlets to let us know when there's a change, it's still the same response. We do nothing about it. And we have an advantage. We know. They didn't even know.
We go on with life like it's our basic everyday.
Case in point, I can give you an example. Do you realize that if you buy up enough streets, buy up enough houses on the street, you can actually change the name of that street?
Yep, trust me.
So hopefully you'll understand and have a better understanding of how this took place. And also remember, if there is no self-determination, the enumerators are labeling these people that now live on this property. They're not asking the people who are on this property, which is now Jackson County, which was once Cherokee Nation, are you Indian? They're going there talking to the landowner now. They'll be talking to Gunter. And Gunter says, yeah, all those people that you see working in that field, those are my slaves. Don't you think he would know their names?
Mm-hmm. So look at it on the census now. How many of us, when we going through the census looking for our ancestors, 1 year where they live in is considered Georgia. 5 years later, it's considered South Carolina.
So now you know how it's being done. You have the surveyors working in conjunction with the squatters, working in conjunction with the immigrants. So the surveyors work for who? The state. So the
At this time, they still forming state lines at this time. This is the beginning of it.
Mm-hmm. So the surveyors are working with the state, and the squatters are working with the surveyors, and the chiefs know who the state representatives are, so the chiefs must know. Especially, that had to be the case here because Gunther ends up being one of the signers on the treaty. And I bet you he didn't give up the land that he owned. I bet you that land that was ceded, that he owned, he kept it.
Yep, like a lot of them did. Your first governor of Mississippi.
So while the tribes are thinking, hey, he's being cool, he's letting us stay on this land and work because they're trying to kick us off, they don't realize that he was the reason why they ended up getting kicked off in the first place.
Even look at some of the ancestors that's still in the South that never moved. They never went anywhere. They never had to. They just changed the name of everything. We know what we consider Georgia today in some places was considered Florida. Think about it. New Orleans, Arkansas, a lot of this stuff didn't exist.
Yeah, man. That's why genealogy is important. That's why we at the Conscious Assembly, our goal is to help you find and do your genealogy. And if you so choose, help you find your tribe. Help you and your tribe to become self-sufficient. And that's what we're here to do. We're not here to tell anybody what their tribe should be. We're not here to tell you what nationality you should be. We're not here to tell you that everybody that's here is African or everybody here is Indian or what have you. We're not here to tell you what your religious affiliation should be. We're not here to tell you any of that. Our main purpose is to help you do your genealogy, tie into your tribe, find your tribe, and then help you and your tribe become self-sufficient. That's it. Free says we got ganged up on, then stopped being tribal, and now look at who was listed as gangs today. The great switcheroo. Man, this is a major bombshell.
Mm-hmm. And it's just one.
So again, shout out to Doodle Vision for bringing an Indian perspective and letting us know how slaves ended up on plantations that were once reservations. Does anybody have anything they would like to say before we head out and get to work? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Nothing else I can think to add on.
Well, bro, go ahead and take us out of here then.
On that note, like we say, it's always fun when we kick it with the relatives. And until the next Rising Show, peace.